It's just so bad. I didn't mean to play for real. I don't care if he tried to kill me first. I don't want to kill nobody. How am I supposed to live with myself after this?
Well, you know, I can't tell you what you need to do or what the right thing to do is, but there are people that you can talk to, and you know, counselors and grief counselors to, you know, to talk about. Talking is the best thing you can do.
What is my family?
Well, I can tell you this right now. Your parents know that Giovanni's dead, and you know they are still your parents. At the end of the day, you know, your dad was telling me, you know, you're his son. He still loves you. You know, it's hard to think that this was something that you had planned out for weeks and wanted to try and go do.
What the detective doesn't know is that Dylan has been watching shows like Dexter, and his Facebook page was covered in violent images. Dylan would tell his friends that he wanted to know what it was like to kill someone, but they would shrug it off and tell Dylan to stop watching so much TV.
Raged on you.
I got you.
I hate fighting. Every time I fight, something bad happens, but I've never killed nobody before. How am I supposed to live in that neighborhood knowing that I killed their parent's son?
Well, that's something I can't answer that, unfortunately. I can't tell you, you know, what the next step you need to do is. Like I said, I would recommend talking with someone, a grief counselor, and just talking it out, because you let that stuff build up inside, it's gonna tear you down. Right.
I don't know what to do, man. I've never killed somebody before. I'm not even a grown-up.
Have you ever gone and killed anything else, like animals or anything before?
The only thing that I used to kill were lizards, and that was because my grandpa used to give me 50 cents each.
Kind of like a pest management kind of thing, kind of just before the lizard population gets too big, your grandpa would help you get that.
Yeah, but that's it.
No, like dogs, cats, squirrels, any animals like that.
I used to kill cats.
About how long ago was that?
When I was like 11, and back, like, for a very short time when I was getting bullied, but that was like almost 5 years ago.
Okay, so about
It was mainly I only did that stuff when I was getting bullied or like I had something really stressed. I haven't did any of that stuff in like a long time.
So when bullied or stressed?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know about how many you killed?
Only two. I don't have the stomach, man.
Do you know whose cats they were?
I don't know.
Were they strays or like?
Probably just straight. I don't know, it was so long ago. And it wasn't even like I was getting satisfaction out of it. I would just be mad and like I would see a cat and I would kick it really hard and it would just stop with me.
Okay.
But I feel like shit. I don't even like want to go home. I don't want to face my family. I killed somebody. I mean, if anybody should be mad, it should be me because he effed the girl I like, but that was so long ago. The only thing I can think about getting mad is if he did Rubik's Cube.
How long ago was it that he slept with the girl that you were into?
That's what I'm saying. It's not even worth it. Two years ago, maybe. And I'm not even mad because I don't even, like, I'm not gay, but I don't know what it is. I just, these past 2 years, I haven't been attracted to anything. I just don't want to get in trouble. Dad said when I came home and told Dad what I just told you, he looked at me and he said, I don't believe you. And I know what that's going to look like with freaking people who see this on a daily basis.
Dylan has shown no concern for his victim or his victim's family, only himself. The detective begins gathering DNA samples from Dylan while they wait for the crime scene investigation to finish. At that point, the detective will be made aware of Dylan's secrets, and he will confront Dylan with them.
But how long do you think they'll be done with the investigation?
Oh, I can't give a good timetable on that. I can't honestly tell you, because if I
So
give
what
you...
am I supposed to do?
Well, that right now, the purpose of me talking with you is to get your side of the story in a series of events. We've got detectives that are at your house talking with your parents. We've got detectives that are in the woods with other crime scene techs. I mean, it's typically these are a pretty lengthy process because we don't like to jump to conclusions or miss something. So I can't honestly give you a timetable because I'd be lying to you at that point. If I tell you, oh, it'll be like 3 more hours, something could come up, it could be a lot longer or shorter. I honestly can't tell you how long it's going to be.
We're just getting screwed.
Why do you say that?
So it always happens. I'll always get screwed some type of way.
There are some other people around the neighborhood that were saying that you made comments to them about wondering what it's like to kill someone recently.
No, see, this is exactly what I was telling that lady on the phone. Everybody's just gonna start saying stuff.
Which, I'm
about
sorry, which
like
lady?
because my dad was saying the same stuff. He was like, he's like, watching all this Dexter. I don't believe it. I knew this was gonna happen. As soon as y'all start talking to people are gonna be like, oh, he talks about this. He talks about this. It's not true.
What?
Never had the. I said, I wonder how it feels like how to kill like Dexter, because you know who Dexter is.
The HBO show?
Yeah, he kills like rapists and stuff. But I'm not gonna kill somebody on purpose. Right now, I'm accidentally killing Gio. Right now, I can't keep the guilt from actually killing him, the anxiety away.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I purposely end my life like this? Like I don't know if I'm ever gonna get better after this.
So,
Because I just bought the first season of Dexter, and
Okay.
it's weird because he don't have the the anxiety.
mm-hmm.
He killed bad people and stuff. You know what I'm saying? That's all I was making conversation about. But I do not remember anything about asking Zach for a baseball bat though, because I have a baseball bat in my house, obviously.
Okay. There was.
And trust me, I wouldn't kill somebody because just talking about it right now is making me just want to throw up, bro. And I want my dad here so bad, bro. I need help, bro.
There was someone other than Zach that told a detective that you had told someone that you wanted to take someone out into the woods and kill them. That.
No, see now that I'm gonna deny because not only did I only talk about Zach with those things, it was only Zach. So I've never talked about nobody else.
Do you know?
And that those words have never came out my mouth.
Do you know Zach's talked with anyone about that? Well, your conversation with him.
Maybe.
If he had or would talk with someone, who would he talk with? Do you know?
Probably his sisters or his family, people that live with him.
Who are his family? I don't know Zach's.
Haley, Amber, and his mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, I knew this was gonna happen. Everybody's gonna be like, oh, Dylan just got into this Dexter show, or oh, Dylan said something about this, and they're gonna try to put me to blame for this. It's the Dexter stuff. I said, yeah, I wonder what it feels like to live with no anxiety and kill and have no anxiety and kill the bad people. That's all I said, but I've never asked any of those.
About how long ago did you start watching Dexter?
Like 2 weeks.
Oh, about 2 weeks ago. How far have you gone into it?
Disc 3.
Is that what season is that?
The first one.
It's still the first season.
Yeah, I'm not stupid. I'm not gonna watch a TV show and then go outside and then kill somebody that's retarded. Stupid.
Have you, while watching Dexter, ever think, maybe this is something to help the anxiety go away?
No, because it doesn't look like it's helping it go away right now.
One thing the detective found interesting was as soon as the police arrived, Dylan came running out of the woods holding a pair of latex gloves. If it's true that Giovanni put them on before picking up the bat, why would Dylan be holding them?
I'ma let my hair down, I feel smooth, and tonight I don't care about eyes on me, cause I'm putting on a rare crown.
some of the things that they're seeing at the scene isn't really adding up with, what
What
you
do you
told
mean?
me. Well, the whole thing with the gloves, for you to grab the gloves and run out after realizing that you just beat the crap out of
Yes,
Gio,
I grabbed the gloves because I knew exactly what this was going to happen. If I didn't try to take up for myself what you're doing, I've seen too many TV shows to know what's going to happen. I knew this was going to happen. That's why I grabbed the gloves for proof. So, because when his fingerprints is all over the inside of those gloves, y'all can know that I'm telling the truth.
And
I knew this was going to happen.
what would happen if, you process for fingerprints and DNA? Are you familiar with,
Yeah,
I see a lot of
I-
shows. So then you know that fingerprints are unique to each person, right?
Yes.
And that DNA is unique to each person. Even identical twins don't have the same DNA. So when we process these gloves for fingerprints and DNA, what would happen, or what would you say if I come and say, you know what, Gio's DNA was not in the gloves. His fingerprints were not in the gloves.
There's got to be at least one fingerprint in them gloves. Because I know my fingerprints are going to be in the gloves. I'm going to already tell you. I picked up the gloves. My fingerprints are going to be on the baseball bat. His fingerprints are going to be on the baseball bat.
Is your DNA going to be inside the gloves, like in the fingertips?
No,
like you were wearing the gloves?
No, my DNA, I know where my DNA is going to be at because when I picked them up, the gloves were inside out.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about like the tips of the fingers? Like if you had put it on your hand, would it be?
I didn't put the gloves on. I just held them like this, and they were inside out. And then when he told me to drop them, I dropped them right there by the woods.
But I'm just struggling to understand why you would. You say for proof. What
This is
proof?
what you're doing right now, and what them detectives are saying. I knew this was gonna happen. I'm not stupid.
Well, I'm not saying you are. But by all means, that's the last thing I'm saying. I'm just struggling to understand. You say that you grabbed these gloves for proof.
Yes.
To prove what though?
That he came at me first.
Well, how would the gloves prove he came at you first?
Because he had them on when he was using the baseball glove. He had the gloves 1st and the baseball bat first. He had both those first. I grabbed the baseball bat, and then after I was done with the baseball bat, then I grabbed the gloves. And the gloves were inside out. So if my DNAs are on the fingertips, they're going to be there because the gloves were inside out, dude.
Were they completely inside out?
Yes, like where they were blue on his hands, he went like this. And it came all the way out, and on the inside were like white. And I don't say they're going to be near the fingertips, but they're going to be on the inside of the glove because the glove was inside out.
And you said Gio's fingerprints would be on the bat as well?
Baseball bat and the glove, there's no doubt about that because he had both of them first before I did.
How did he have the bat before you brought the bat?
I put it behind me, and he told me to turn around because he was taking a piss, and when I heard the crink, he picked it up.
But didn't you say he put the gloves on at some point behind you
Yeah,
and
at
picked
some
it
point,
up?
because when I turned around, he had already had the gloves on, but he had just picked up the baseball bat because I heard his footstep behind him.
Well, how would his fingerprints be on the bat if he had the gloves on?
We got into a struggle. He's gotta have there's gotta be his fingerprints on that bat.
But from what you've told me, he had the gloves on when he had the bat.
When he had the bat.
When he went to hit you, you blocked it, you grabbed the bat, and as you grabbed it, he punched you and let go of the bat.
Yes.
And then he threw the gloves down.
Yes.
And came at you, and that's when you hit him.
Yes, but it was a fight, so he grabbed the. See what I'm saying? I knew this was gonna happen.
I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not trying to do any, funny business. I'm just trying to go with what you told me, and then off what we have and piece it together.
I'm trying to go as exactly what happened as I'm close to going. But it's kind of hard when all that stuff is happening and remember every little detail. But he did have the gloves on when he had the baseball bat. But he's got to have fingerprints in the gloves and on the baseball bat, not just mine.
How would he have fingerprints on the bat though? Like if he's wearing the gloves, he's grabbing the bat, he wouldn't leave fingerprints. But then you say after you were able to take the bat, he punched you, he threw the gloves down, said and just came at you, and then you hit him in the side of the head. He backed up, and then you hit him 6 more times. He went down, and then you hit him more. But during that sequence, I don't understand how his fingerprints would be on the bat.
Maybe like you grabbed it or something.
Well, I mean, you were there. I wasn't. Did he grab the bat? Did he not?
I can't really tell you. It was so fast, bro. I'm trying to tell you, I didn't go in there planning on killing him. I went in there and planned on smoking weed with him. I knew this was gonna happen. As soon as I freaking got out the woods and called 911, I was like, watch some crazy crap happen and all this turn around on me. I knew this was gonna happen.
Well, when you say you knew it would happen, what do you mean you knew it would happen?
Like, as soon as I was freaking done, when I was done and going outside the woods, I was like, oh my God, watch it all be my fault. Watch me be the only one to get in trouble. Watch me to get in trouble. You know what I'm saying? I knew this was gonna happen.
Well, who else would be in trouble if it wasn't just you?
I didn't know Jill was gonna die. I thought he would freaking be alive. And then when he got back up, y'all can arrest him for coming at me, but I didn't know he was gonna die. And now that he's dead, I have no way to prove my innocence. No way at all. See, I'm basically just screwed here.
It appears that Dylan either doesn't understand or he doesn't care about the situation he is in. Dylan fantasized about becoming a serial killer, but when it came time to take a life, Dylan realized he wasn't the real-life Dexter.
You see, but it was a homicide. I didn't want to go in there and kill him, bro. Everybody's trying to make it sound like planned it, and everybody's trying to, you're like asking questions. The detectives are saying, well, this doesn't, everybody's trying to make it seem like I planned it, when all I was trying to be was a good guy and go in there and get my friend high. That's all I was trying to do, I swear.
Okay. And I'm not saying that you planned this, or I'm not saying that you wanted to kill him. Alright? My job as a detective is to ask a lot of questions. That's what I do. Alright? Well, I've got other detectives that obviously I'm not there in the woods. I'm not seeing what they're seeing. Alright? They relay information to me. They say, hey, what about this? I'm like, well, I don't know. Let me ask them. That's how it works. Alright? I know it's a lot of questions. It's frustrating and it's stressful, but
It's stressful because it's looking like they're gonna pin this all on me now, bro. And now I'm really scared because I didn't do anything wrong. Oh my God, my life's already ruined, man. What am I gonna do? Can you give me any ideas? I mean,
with what?
what am I gonna do, man?
Unfortunately, I've got nothing to help answer that question of what's next, or what do you do next. I've never been in that situation that you're sitting in.
Me either, man. I need help. I need help, man.
I mean, you did a number on him. I mean, looking at him, his parents showed me a picture of him before I walked in the woods, and looking at him lying there, he didn't even look the same. Right? His face is unrecognizable. His parents are not going to be able to have an open casket viewing for him because that's how bad his face is.
You don't think I feel bad about that, man?
Well, I can't say what you think or what you feel because I'm not you.
I feel bad. I feel like shit. I feel like I'm a monster. I feel like I don't deserve to live.
Because, I mean, you felt that bad. I haven't touched it. I haven't held it. I don't know how heavy it is, but, I mean, that is dented. Like, flattened because of how hard you hit him. Alright? And that takes a lot.
I know, man. I know. What do you think I'm telling myself right now? I thought I was an anxious kid who couldn't do all that. But when he punched me, I don't know what happened inside me, bro. It just everything went away. And it was just me or him. That's all it was. I'm telling you, you don't understand.
So when he punched you in that face, in your face, from earlier you said your blood started boiling and you had that rage, if you would, of, like, I want to kill him, and that's when the swinging started. Am I right? Is that accurate? I mean,
Yes.
And have you ever felt that before?
Yes.
When?
Almost every fight that I've been in, but I've never had a baseball bat to hit somebody with. It's always been my fists.
How many fights have you been in the past, if you had to guess? I know.
In the past year, I've been doing really good. I haven't gotten, except this. This is the first altercation I've been in since 2015.
Okay. Is that when you were?
I got arrested for the fight with him.
What about in the past, say, 5 years? How many fights have you gone in, if you had to guess?
2.
In the end, Dylan would be charged and convicted of first-degree murder, and he received 60 years in prison with a chance of parole after 25 years. Dylan thought imitating a serial killer on TV would solve all his problems, but instead, it cost him at least 25 years of his life. What are your thoughts on this case? What would you do if someone told you they wanted to know what it would feel like to kill someone? Please share your thoughts in the comments below.
From the beach to your backyard. Summer looks good on you.
Back in 2018, I ended up flying over to Greece for a week-long solo vacation. There were a few hotels I had my eye on while I was planning the trip, but then for the same price, I could get an entire apartment on Airbnb. And some of the stuff they had available for rent was absolutely amazing. For the price of an entire ensuite hotel room, I could get an apartment that looked something like a legitimate millionaire might choose to stay in during a visit to a French Riviera or something. Greece doesn't exactly have the strongest economy, so it kind of made sense that it would be going so cheap, but even so, compared to the other listings, there's no way to describe it other than suspiciously affordable. Like any other sane person would have done, I immediately went to check the reviews, and even with all the 5-star reviews and glowing praise of the apartment's owner, I still thought the whole thing was just way too good to be true. But then again, there were only 2 windows where the place wasn't booked, so not only did that show that the other people were genuinely interested in the place, but it also meant that it was a case of poop or get off the pot, so to speak. I could book the place, check it out, then if it turned out to be some well-distinguished nightmare, I could just find myself a hotel chain with a simpler but more reliable kind of room, and just use the place to rest my head after long days of exploring my ancestral home. The flight over to Greece was the first long flight I'd been on, and the whole process just completely exhausted me. It's weird that just sitting on a plane for almost 10 hours can do that to a person, but I guess it was mainly the stress that took it out of me. Worrying that I'd lost my passport or my e-ticket, constantly worrying that I'd left something crucial back in my apartment. All irrational first-time flyer stuff, I know, but after the relief of landing without a hitch and making it to the Airbnb okay, I felt like I could sleep for days. Even the elation of seeing the apartment didn't keep me up for long, and my God, was I elated. It was everything I could have possibly hoped for. A magnificent mosaic of black and white tiles and wrought iron spiral staircases. Hell, they could have charged double the asking price and people still would have paid it to stay in a place like that. But then the question remained, why exactly were the owners charging such a low rate? I know, it was a huge question, one that any right-minded person would have still been asking themselves, but I guess the place's beauty and my exhaustion made for this perfect cocktail to wipe my brain of thought, and I told myself that I could always properly survey the place the next morning after a good night's sleep. I remember waking up just before dawn to the sound of something scraping really close next to me. I mean, maybe scraping isn't the right word, but I ended up leaning over to the bedside table, switching on the light, and seeing what was definitely a cockroach running for the darkness below the bed. I hate bugs, and cockroaches have to be the top of the list for me. And suddenly, I understood why the pricing of the Airbnb was so low. The entire building probably had an infestation that they just couldn't get rid of, and maybe they couldn't afford to have the place bug bombed, so they were hoping for a few quick bucks from Airbnb so they could afford it. That little theory of mine made much more sense when the owners refused me any kind of refund, giving me some bullcrap excuse of how Greece has lots of bugs in the summer. Other guests didn't have a problem with it. They knew what they were doing, acting as if though a roach infestation is just like having a few houseflies. And trying to get a refund became a whole other story, just not nearly as scary as the one I have to tell here. So, if it wasn't already clear, there was no way in hell that I was about to spend another night in a place that had roaches so close to the bed. And luckily, I hadn't actually unpacked by that point. So I was able to just grab my stuff, jump in the rental and drive down through town towards the harbor front where I knew that there were a bunch of hotels. Only as I'm driving, I can feel that there's something wrong with my left ear, kind of like it felt cold on the inside. I started thinking that maybe I had some kind of ear infection, that the exhaustion and the stress of flying had messed with my immune system. But then, I was driving, on my way to book a new
This was during a road trip last summer. I was taking a long route home from visiting a few relatives, so I was driving about 4 hours each day to a different destination. This was after my last stop. Everything left on the last 8 hours of driving home was just empty woods as far as I knew. There was another city I wanted to stop at, but it was just too far out of the way for me to justify stopping there. From my previous stop, I left at 6 p.m. to get to my final Airbnb that I had booked at a cabin about 2 hours away. It happened to be on the route home, so that's why I went with it. I figured it'd be better than whatever cheap and crappy motel there was along the road. Where I was, the landscape was pretty flat, but there were a decent amount of trees scattered around. When I pulled up to the cabin, it was clear they had planted a row of large pine trees perfectly in a line at the front of the cabin, with the gravel driveway going through the middle. Honestly, the outside of it, mixed with the landscape, was a little bit spooky. I parked and unlocked the padlock with the code I had emailed from the host. Despite the outside, on the inside, the cabin looked newly renovated, probably to be an Airbnb. But it was really nice, small but cozy. I didn't unpack much since I'd only be there for the night. I sat at the table and ate a meal I'd picked up from a drive-thru. But only 10 minutes after I'd gotten settled in, there was a knock at the door. It startled me because I'd never heard a car pull up or anyone walking outside. I got up and answered the door. There was a man, looking about 40-ish, with a gray and black beard and shaved head. "Hi, I was just stopping by to make sure you got in and everything was good," he said with a smile. Knowing it was just the host now, I said I was good and it was all great. I then said goodnight and shut the door. I thought it was a bit strange he showed up unannounced just to ask if I was okay, but I thought he must have lived close by or maybe even on the other side of the property or something. Also, it's worth mentioning that the guy had an unusually strong odor coming from him. It smelled like maybe he'd been working out in the field all day. I just found it a bit odd as well. I went back to the table and finished eating, then took a shower to wind down for the night. I was only in there for maybe 5 minutes before feeling tired enough and just wanting to lay in bed already. I dried off and hopped in bed, staying on my phone for a little bit, when there was another knock at the front door. This one scared me just as much as the first time, because again, I never heard a car pull up or anyone walking outside. It had to be the host again, but why? And so soon after he just came over. Immediately, I knew this was odd, and I felt really uncomfortable. I checked my phone, and of course, there was no text or call from him. I slowly walked into the main room, hearing him knock several more times. I wasn't sure if I wanted to answer the door or not, but I ended up just calling out from the other side and asking what he needed. He stopped knocking. "Can you open the door, please? I just wanted to ask you one more thing. I'll be quick, I promise." I didn't respond for a few seconds, because I honestly didn't know what to say. In those few seconds, he must have gotten impatient, because he knocked on the door again and asked if I could open it. I said it was late and I wasn't in the mood, so if there wasn't an emergency, then I'd like to be left alone. He took a long time to answer after that. The silence was really eerie. Once it reached a whole minute, it was even more so. I didn't hear him walk away, so was he just standing out there? I quietly walked up and looked through the small window on the door. He wasn't out there. I immediately thought that he must have snuck away, because surely I would have heard his footsteps on the gravel if he just walked away. But then, where was he? I didn't know what to do. I felt really uncomfortable and didn't know why he was acting so strange. I stood there by the door for a minute and listened for anything. Honestly, I was scared to move. But then, I happened to glance over at one of the windows in the living room. I saw his eyes staring into mine. I panicked and sprinted to the bedroom, where I called 911. While I waited, I heard what sounded like him trying to lift open the window, which was terrifying, but also odd considering he had to have had a key to his own house. But that's when I figured it all out. That man wasn't the host. This was confirmed when police arrived. He'd already run off. We have no idea in which direction, but we got in contact with the actual host and owner of the cabin. I don't know what that man's intentions were that night. Obviously, he was lying and clearly plotting something, but I'm just glad I didn't open the door.
The greatest esports competition across time starts this May. Witness intense battles where heroes and villains collide. 5 regions: Americas, EMEA, China, Asia, and Oceania. A total prize pool of over $3 million, including $1 million in the grand finals. One legendary team will earn the title champion. Welcome to Marvel Rivals Ignite.
Thanks to Freedom Mobile's affordable Canada, US, Mexico plans, Randy's not worried about overpriced roaming fees while traveling. But he should worry that Hot Peach is open to interpretation. Maybe look that up, Randy.
This was a couple years ago, when I was working 2 jobs to save up for a condo. I had a stable 9-to-5 full-time gig, but did deliveries as a way to make a little bit extra cash whenever I had time. Actually, I found myself doing sometimes 30 hours a week, just doing deliveries every day after work. This night, I started after getting dinner at 6:30. It was a pretty good night, to be honest. I was getting a lot of good orders with good tips, so really I should have just taken the rest of the night off and given myself a break. But I was greedy. I kept working, hoping to continue getting well-paying orders. By the time it was 11, it had slowed down a lot, and the last few orders I'd done were just average. I really wanted to end on a good one though, so I kept driving around until one came up that was decent. Finally, when one did, I quickly accepted it. Almost $20 for a delivery 15 minutes away. Who wouldn't take that? Once I got the food, I started heading to the address. The roads were of course very quiet and empty at this time of night, so the drive there was smooth. However, it took me toward a wooded section of town that I wasn't even aware had houses in it. I made sure I was on the right route several times though, just to be sure I was going the right way. When I got to the final turn, it was on a well-maintained gravel road going into the forest. I drove a little ways down until there was a gate. It was one of those small ones, basically just 2 pillars on either side of the path with a chain running between them. The chain on these wasn't up though, so I drove through. My headlights weren't the best, so I couldn't see too far ahead, but not too long past the gate, I pulled into a parking area. I was confused. It definitely was not leading to a house. I pulled into a space and put my car in park, then looked out my windows all around. There was a sign on one end. This was a forest preserve. I'd done deliveries to parks and whatnot before, but I always thought forest preserves were closed up at like 8 or 9, and I didn't see anyone here to deliver the order to. Just as I was starting to question what exactly I was supposed to do here, my phone started ringing. It was the customer. I picked up. The voice on the other end was a deep male voice, very gravelly and rugged, almost to a point where it was hard to understand them. He said he saw on the map that I'd parked and asked if I could see him. I said no, to which he explained he was camping with some buddies down one of the trails, and I should be able to spot a campfire if I walk a little closer. I said alright, realizing this was probably why the tip was so large. I did mention to him that I thought the forest preserves were closed, but he said this one allowed overnight camping on certain days. I wasn't a big outdoorsy person, so I didn't know any better. I didn't see any reason he'd have to lie. I turned off my car and got out with his bag of food. I quickly realized that it was really dark and I needed to use my phone as a flashlight to see where I was going. There was only one trail leading out from the parking area, so at least I couldn't get lost. I started walking. It was really quiet outside. I expected to hear the group of guys talking and laughing in the distance, but I didn't. It was just the wind and crickets. Then I saw the light, an orange flame glowing and flickering out in the trees. Oddly, it wasn't on the path though, or right off the side of it. It was far out of the way and amid all the trees. I couldn't see too far down the trail to see if there was a direct path going to it or not, but I just started walking straight to the flame. As I got closer, things were getting really strange. First of all, I didn't hear any voices, and secondly, once I got even closer, I didn't see anyone. It was just a small campfire burning in the middle of nothing. No chairs, no tents, literally nothing. I barely got the chance to whisper "what the hell" under my breath before I heard a stick snap from somewhere out in the trees. I jolted my head toward the sound. There was someone there, but too far for the light to reach, and the faint figure that I could make out was standing still, like they were trying not to be seen. I felt really uneasy. "Hey, I'm the delivery driver. I'll just put your order down over here," I yelled out and set the bag on the ground. As I did, they suddenly decided to show themselves and walk toward me. The man was tall, with dark hair and a scruffy beard. He apologized and said he didn't see me walking up. It was that same deep, gravelly voice from the phone. His smile was disturbing, like he was faking it, and it was really strange that he only showed himself once he knew I saw him. Nothing added up. I stumbled over a few words, but as he got closer and closer, I just decided to turn and run. He called out several times in this creepy, overly nice voice, asking me to come back and that he had cash for me. I didn't stop until I got to the car. I fumbled around with my keys in my shaky hands as I tried to hurry in and turn it on. I backed out and pulled back onto the gravel path to leave, but had to slam on my brakes. The chain was latched across the pillars now, blocking the exit. I stared at it for way too long, trying to think if I could get out and unlatch it, or what to do. Then I heard footsteps coming up behind my car. I didn't even look, I just floored it onto the grass and made it around the pillars. It was a tight squeeze, because there was a short ditch really close to the sides, so if I messed up, my car would have slid down and maybe gotten stuck. Once I was back on the gravel, I sped away. I didn't know what that was back there, but I was stupid not to call the police, even though I think that if I did, they likely would have been long gone anyway. The following morning, I did a little investigating and found that the forest preserve I was at did in fact close at 8 p.m. and never allowed camping or campfires. To me, that confirms the horrible nature of the situation I was in. What he intended to do is unknown, and still haunts me to think about what could have happened in the forest that night.
This happened back many years ago. I was in high school in the early 2000s, and one night my parents went out. They left me and my older sister at home, so it would just be the two of us at the house for dinner. Now, at the time, my older sister was 17 years old and I was 14. We lived in a house in a pretty typical neighborhood. Our parents left us some money to order a pizza or something, and that was the plan. When it got to be like 7 p.m., I told my sister that I was hungry and we should order from this one pizza place that was my favorite. She agreed, and then she called the store with our order. Around 20 minutes later or so, we were just in the living room watching TV, and the doorbell rang. My sister got up and answered with the money that our parents left us. I was like half paying attention as I was more focused on the TV. I heard my sister answer the door and the pizza guy say hello and stuff. I remember that I heard the pizza man ask my sister if she was home by herself, and she replied just saying no. The man said something like, "Oh really?" He couldn't see me from where I was in the living room. The guy said something else, but I couldn't really hear it. I heard my sister respond, but couldn't really make out what she was saying either, but it sounded like she was talking in a kind of rude way. I looked over at that point and saw that my sister appeared kind of annoyed. She handed the money to the guy, and then as he was still saying to have a good night, she slammed the door in his face. Then my sister locked the door as soon as it was shut, sighed, and started walking back over to the living room. I asked her what that was all about. She said, "I forgot about that creep." She went on to say that she was at her friend's house like 2 weeks prior, and the two of them had ordered a pizza. The same delivery guy was the one to show up. I guess that he acted really creepy, trying to flirt with my sister and her friend, and he even asked to come inside the house. They practically had to yell at him to leave and slam the door in his face. She said that she was planning to not order from that pizza place anymore because of him, but forgot about it. I thought that was weird, but I was glad that he was gone now and we had the pizza. I remember that just about 20 or 30 minutes later though, I heard a noise outside. It sounded like a car door closing. I looked out of the living room window and I saw the same pizza guy walking up to the house again. He had a small box in his hands and I wondered why he was at our house again. We hadn't ordered anything else. I warned my sister and she got up and said that she was going to call the police. Before she could though, the man started ringing the doorbell again. My sister and I ignored it at first. Then there was a knock on the door. My sister walked over to the door, did not open it or anything, but yelled at the man to go away. He yelled back from the other side, saying that he brought her a free brownie. She said she didn't want it and was going to call the police if he didn't leave now. What the man said next really creeped me out. He said that he knew my sister was alone and asked for her to let him in. That's when I knew I had to do something. This guy apparently really thought that she was home alone. I stood up and walked over to the door. Then, trying to sound tough, I yelled really loud in my manliest voice that I was also home and that I was going to come out and beat him to a pulp if he didn't leave. At first, I thought it didn't work. The man said something like, "Who's this tough guy?" He still stood around on the front step and didn't seem too affected, as my sister was now dialing the police. The guy laughed a little, as if trying to sound like the whole thing was a joke to him. Then, he finally turned and started walking off. I remember that he walked back to his car and then got in and drove away. The police still came to our house a while later though. My sister made a report and then the cops went to his work. I heard that the man later got fired. Thankfully, he did not come back to our house again after that. I'm glad that I was home that night and was able to help out my sister. The guy was a total creep, and hopefully he didn't harass anyone else like that. I'm a gym teacher and have been for almost 7 years. Back a couple of years ago now, something really crazy happened. So I was teaching several different gym classes, 2 electives and 2 basic required gym classes. The basic ones would be for everyone in the school. We would do basic physical tests and activities as well as some written tests. It was a pretty easy class to get an A in. I remember that on this semester in particular, there was a kid in one of my classes who would rarely show up. He was a student who got very poor grades overall and didn't really seem to try much. He would sometimes only show up once or twice a week. You never really knew if he would be there or not. Then he would randomly show up for a whole week, and his absences were never excused, so his grade in the class plummeted. Probably the largest part of grades for my classes are attendance, which means literally all you have to do is show up and you'll probably pass. I remember that at one point, about midway through the semester, I took him aside and I told him that he really needed to show up more. I tried to make it clear how easy it was to pass the class if he just showed up, but if he kept on the track that he was on, he would probably fail. He pretty much gave me a tough guy routine like he didn't really care and waved me off. Kids are stubborn and sometimes don't understand or care about things like that. At least I tried though. Overall, he showed up on and off for about another week or two. Then he stopped showing up entirely. He was gone for literally the rest of the semester and I had to fail him. So during this time, I lived by myself in a small house that I was renting. A few weeks later, I was home one night. I don't remember the exact time, but it was probably like 10 p.m. or so. I just remember that out of nowhere, I heard the handle to my back door start moving, as if somebody was trying to open it. Instantly, it gave me a terrible feeling, because that was not something that had ever happened before. After the door didn't open, I sort of heard the sound of somebody walking near it. I decided to go over and look. Most of the lights in my house were off at this point, so I carefully made my way to the back. When I got near the back door, I went over to a window. Most of the windows were covered, but when I looked through the blinds, I could see outside. At first, I saw nothing. Then I went over to the back door and I looked out of the window on it. When I looked to the right, that's when I saw what looked like the student from my class, the one who rarely showed up that I talked about. He was by himself and now facing another window that led to the kitchen. It looked like he was going to try to break in or something. I took out my phone and I dialed 911. Then I turned the backyard light on. When I turned it on, I just barely saw the kid stop and then look around. Then he seemed to notice me looking out the window at him. He turned and ran, taking off back around the house and towards the street. I still went through with the call to the police and I reported him. I knew his name and gave his information to the cops. He ended up being caught and admitted that he was going to try to break into my house. He said that he just wanted some drug money and that was all. Why he chose me though, I'm not sure. I thought that maybe it was because he was mad at me for failing him or something, but I'm also guessing that I'm not the only teacher that failed him. I mean, he never showed up to school, so he probably failed all his classes, and I don't think he even cared. Maybe he was going to try to rob all his teachers. I really don't know. I also don't know how he knew where I lived. Did he follow me home? Some of those things remain a mystery, but I never had any more problems with him. He was expelled from the school, and I never saw him again.
It was spring break. I was 18, and this year my family took a trip to a small cabin out in Minnesota. It was just me, my mom, and my younger brother who was only 7 at the time. We were planned to stay at this cabin for the whole week, and part of the reason we were going to Minnesota was to check out some of the smaller towns and scout for a place we might want to move to in the future. Anyway, the cabin my mom booked we had never been to before, and I don't think she knew how far out it was from the closest towns. She was probably more concerned on the price. It was really far north, and about 35 minutes out from any shopping areas. I guess it was a good test at how good we'd handle the rural life though. The drive there was a little over 10 hours. I drove the first few hours, and my mom drove the rest. We got to the cabin at sunset. It was really pretty, the orange skies setting over the dense forest and wildlife. Way different than the skyscrapers and massive office buildings we were used to. The cabin itself was noticeably old, however. Everything creaked, and it didn't look like the place was professionally built. It was fine though. I mean, it was a cabin after all. We settled in for the night, testing out the wood-burning fireplace and just resting after the long drive. I ended up napping for most of the evening. My mom went to bed around 8:30, but because I took a long nap, I stayed up a bit later. My little brother was also in his room, so it was just me hanging out in the cabin. I sat by the fireplace on my phone for a bit, then thought I'd get some fresh air and check out the back porch. It was a really small wooden deck with a sketchy looking fire pit in the middle and a few chairs around it. I sat down and looked out into the forest. The night was really quiet. No cars or busy streets, just the occasional bird crowing in the distance and the trees rustling in the wind. I loved it. Being further up north though, it was a bit more chilly than I expected. I spotted some logs stacked up on the side of the cabin and figured I'd give the fire pit a try. I lit it up no problem, and the fire stayed well maintained in the center, so I guess it wasn't as sketchy as I thought. Anyway, I sat by it for a while. I never get to do this sort of thing, so I just soaked it all in. After about 30 minutes of being outside, there was a very sudden and just completely out of nowhere sound from within the forest. Honestly, I had no clue what it could have been, but I did think that the way it sounded and echoed through the trees was kind of like an axe chopping into a tree or wood. It was only one sound though, and I didn't think it was really possible for anyone to be out here near us. It was pitch black out there, so I couldn't see anything, but whatever it was, it sounded pretty close. As I stayed out there for the next 5 minutes after hearing the sound, I felt my nerves building up a little bit. Just this uneasy feeling that ruined the peacefulness from before. I ended up snuffing out the fire pit and heading back into the cabin. From the sounds of it, my mom and brother were asleep already. I still wasn't all that tired though. I don't know if it was still from the long nap, or maybe the sound I heard waking me up, but I still didn't really feel like going to bed yet. I stayed up in the living room on my phone. I had some movies downloaded, so I didn't have to worry about Wi-Fi. Only 15 or so minutes in, I heard something. I paused the movie and listened. I wasn't sure if it was the cabin creaking from someone waking up or walking around in their room, or maybe just wind hitting the walls. It gave me that uneasy feeling again though. I wasn't used to being in this kind of environment, so I think that's why I got so easily unnerved. It was only a minute later that I heard it again though. This time it was from the opposite end of the cabin, not where the bedrooms were. It was from outside the wall, just next to me. The only thing there was a window. I leaned a little closer and listened. Just when I thought I might be hearing something, a loud sequence of knocks shook the front door. It vibrated across the wooden walls. I froze up for a moment, then heard my mom get out of bed and hurry into the hallway, asking what that was. I was standing up at this point, knowing something was wrong, but told her someone was at the door. I could tell she was pretty frightened too. She immediately went back to get her phone and call 911 because there was no reason for anyone to be banging on our cabin door in the middle of nowhere and in the middle of the night. As she did, I walked up to the door and looked out the peephole. It was extremely dark. There were no porch lights or anything, but I could see the basic figure of a man standing fairly close, just staring ahead at the door. And in the dark, I could see the outline of a heavy wooden axe in his hand. I felt my eyes widen and nerves spiking. Everything rushed through my mind. I tried to think of any reason this wasn't what it looked like maybe he needed help or was lost, or I don't know. Nothing seemed to explain this as being anything but bad. The man banged on the door several more times as my mom was on the phone with an operator. They never spoke though, stating any excuse for them being here. They just aggressively knocked on the door. In the heat of the moment, it was hard to tell how much time passed. It felt like forever though. But then he did what we were all terrified of. One loud crack slammed into the door, and the slightest bit of the metal axe pierced through the wood. At that point, we all ran into the farthest room and locked ourselves in. We heard more hits against the door, but only 4 or 5 before they stopped. We weren't sure if he'd busted the door down already, or if he had given up, but we just waited. It took just under 15 minutes for the first officer to arrive to the cabin, which was honestly quicker than expected, given how far out we were. The front door had several large gashes in it, but there were no signs of the man having gotten in. There were also no signs of where the man went. It's just assumed that he walked back out into the forest. The running theory is the guy was out in the forest when he saw my campfire from all the way out there, luring him to the cabin. It doesn't explain what he was doing out there at night with an axe, or why he came up to the cabin, but there's not really any way to know those things without him being caught and questioned. We obviously didn't stay there any longer. In case you were wondering, we didn't end up moving there either. I work at a data center. It's at a small warehouse/office place. My job is to just stare at a monitor and make sure all the systems stay online. If anything goes down, I head to the operating rooms to usually just give it a quick restart. It's a really simple and easy job, and because it's overnight and just me, I can really do whatever I want, so long as I'm constantly checking the status of all the systems. Although, I'm sure you can tell just how boring it can get sometimes. By the time this happened, I'd already seriously considered quitting several times, but forced myself to stick with it. Anyway, this night I drove over to the office at my usual 10 p.m. The building was at the end of a long road and backed up to trees, so there were never any cars or people in the area. I parked and headed up to the office. This week, I had a show on Netflix that I'd been binging for my entire shifts, so after giving the computers a few checks, I immediately set up my laptop and started watching my show. For reference, there's usually no trips in any of the systems during my shift. Since it's overnight, there's less of a load on everything, so it's less likely anything will happen. I'd say maybe twice a week there would be an outage, and it'd only be a single system that I can quickly just restart and get working again. I think I got through just about 2 episodes of my show, so it was about 2 hours in when I saw a notification pop up on the monitor. One of the systems lost connection. I paused the show and got up. I walked downstairs and through multiple corridors until I got to the huge storage room that was the main hub of the data center. There were massive rows of shelves all throughout the room. The notification I got had a row and section number. I walked down the aisle and over to the correct section. It happened to be the very last row and the section on the far corner, and strangely, it was really obvious why it was down. The main power cable wasn't plugged in. It was laying on the ground like it had been pulled on or fallen out somehow. I really didn't know how that was possible. In all my years of having the job, I'd never seen a heavy-duty cable randomly fall out like that. It just doesn't happen. Regardless though of however it happened, I plugged it back in and booted up the system. Everything came back online and seemed to be working properly. The obvious and really only answer to fall back on was that it did somehow just wiggle out of the sockets. Maybe over time it slowly shook out, and it just so happened to fall out tonight. I did a quick walkthrough of the rest of the aisles, checking for anything else while I was down there. Then I started heading back through all the corridors and back to the office. As I was in one of the corridors, I heard an unfamiliar sound. It was almost like a heavy door thumping closed in a doorway. It was a little creepy sounding, especially with there being no other sounds in the entire building. Unfortunately, I didn't really know the rest of the layout of the warehouse, so if it actually was a door, I had no way of knowing which door or where at. And although it sounded like a door, it very well could have been anything else. This was a massive warehouse, and often the metal pipes would bend and creak in the walls, or make similar thump sounds. It was just that exact sound I hadn't heard before. I made my way back to the room and sat down. I double-checked the systems again, then continued my show. Only a few minutes passed by, and I'd barely even gotten through one scene before I heard what sounded like a couple of fast-paced footsteps scurrying through the corridor next to me. It gave me a quick jump scare, but I got up and opened the door, looking down the hallway. There was nothing there, just an empty corridor with a door on the far end. But it sounded like it was just outside of the office I was in. I knew I wouldn't be able to keep my mind off of it if I didn't take a look around. I walked toward the end and opened the door. When I did and looked down the next hallway, I barely saw the door on the other end closing, like someone had just went through it. My heart was pounding now. I cautiously walked further up and opened the door. This one led to a hallway with multiple office doors in it. Is someone in here? Hello? My voice echoed through the corridor. I took a few steps inside. It was eerily quiet, not the slightest sound throughout the building. Were they hiding in one of these office rooms? As that thought creeped into my head, I got really unsettled and decided not to go any further down that hallway. I took one step back toward the door, but just when I did, one of the office doors next to me swung open. I only caught a glimpse of a man running out of the unlit room before I turned and booked it out of there. I could hear his footsteps echo behind me as I made it to the next corridor and into the staircase. I didn't want to risk getting trapped, so I took the fire exit door and just ran out into the parking lot. Once I got closer to my car, I started calling the police. Whoever was in there didn't chase me out the same exit though. The cops made it pretty quick and did an extensive search of the entire building, which took nearly half an hour. But the guy was gone, probably ran out a different exit and into the woods behind the building. Him being in there explained a lot though. The wire that had been disconnected earlier in the night was on the corner section, which the man probably bumped into while sneaking around. The company I worked for did a huge investigation to review security footage and try to figure out how he got in and if he stole anything. I didn't get much information on it, however, because I'm not authorized. I think it's pretty clear that whatever he was in there for, he likely didn't want me to know and was probably planning to prevent me from blowing his cover. How he would have done that after leading me through the corridors, I'm fortunate enough to not know.
Find your forever home internet. Oxio, born to be online.
I used to work as a delivery driver for the local pizza place that was by me. It was a pretty good place and popular in the local town. There would be a lot of deliveries that I would get, and I would have to drive all over. I still remember my creepiest delivery though. It was kind of like this stereotype delivery that I did not want to get when I signed up for the job. So we got an order pretty late at night, like 11 p.m. I got the pizza and then I got the address and headed out. I didn't know where it was, but I knew that I had never really delivered to that area before. At this point, I was still fairly new to the job and I was also young, like 18 years old. Upon arriving to the neighborhood, I saw that it was really sketchy looking and run down. Many houses there had overgrown yards and some had boarded up windows. There were old cars with duct tape holding up the fenders and looking all beat up. When I got to the house that I was to deliver to, it didn't look any better than the rest. I was already creeped out and didn't even want to leave the car, but I had a job to do, so I parked on the side of the street and then got out. There was also hardly any light provided by street lamps. There were just a few, and then I crossed the street and I walked onto the property. I made my way to the front step and then rang the doorbell. I saw that all the lights inside the house appeared to be off, which was not a good sign. As I waited, I was getting more and more nervous by the second. After probably a full minute, I still hadn't heard anything. I wanted to just bolt out of there and go back to the shop. Still, I forced myself to stay there because the pizza had not yet been paid for. Within a few more seconds, I started to hear movement inside, like somebody was walking around, but I still didn't see any lights turn on or anything. I just had a strong instinct to run and get out of there, so I did. I just set the pizza down and then bolted, like I had wanted to do much earlier. I literally ran off the property, leaving the pizza on the front step. Then I crossed the street again and made it to my car. After I got inside and started the engine, I felt much safer. Before leaving, I looked around. That's when I saw what appeared to be a man walking through the front yard. It was really dark, so I couldn't see very well, and the house was slightly behind me, but I saw a guy start to walk out and cross the street from the property. He was like 50 feet at least behind my car, and he wasn't walking towards me, but it still seemed odd. It seemed like this was the guy who had been in the house, and he hadn't even picked up the pizza. So at that point, I started to drive away. As I was making my way down the street, I saw the lights to this car that had been parked a ways behind me on the street turn on. That guy must have gotten inside of it. Then the car started driving. The first thing that I noticed at this point was how quickly the car accelerated, much too quick for the residential street that we were on. As I continued to drive, the car quickly caught up to me and was soon right on my bumper. That gave me a bad feeling once again. I turned off the street to a busier one, and the car behind me did the same thing. I realized then that I was likely being followed. I started driving around randomly and turning at random places. The car kept up with me and did the same things that I did. With it being really late at night, the roads were pretty quiet. That made it probably easier for the guy to keep up with me. It wasn't until I had been randomly driving around for like 10 minutes that I remembered to go to a police station, and it worked like a charm. The guy followed me until we were there. Then he circled around the parking lot of the station before leaving. I stayed there for a few minutes, called my boss to explain what had happened, and then went back. Luckily, I didn't get in trouble with my boss for not getting the money for the pizza. He understood that it could have been dangerous. I didn't have to deliver to that neighborhood again, which I'm really grateful for. Other than that, I enjoyed being a pizza delivery driver. That story still gives me the creeps to think about, though. I'm a high school gym teacher. It's a job that I really like because I played sports in high school and college as well. I'm a pretty active person, so it's fun to help the younger people become more active and stuff. Anyways, one of the other reasons I like being a gym teacher is because I generally don't have to grade that much stuff. I would not enjoy teaching another subject where I would have to be grading papers constantly. But for gym class, there are only a few points in the semester where I do have to grade. Each class is required at our school to have a written final test, and some are required to have midterms as well. So, on the day of this story, we had just taken finals. Our tests were not just on the Scantron or online though. There was a good amount of writing parts that students had to do, so that meant I would have to read each one of them and grade them. I figured that I would get it done that night, and I told myself I was not leaving until it was finished. Now, I had 4 classes to grade and about 100 tests total. I began grading right when school ended at about 3 o'clock. I continued on, taking only short breaks a couple of times. When I was finally done, it was almost 10 o'clock at night. Now, by that point, I'm pretty sure that I was the only person left at the school besides the overnight janitors. I packed up my things and then left the school to walk to my car in the parking lot. The teachers would park in the east lot, which was sort of in the back and next to a heavily wooded area. I would always park sort of in the back corner. That's where my spot was. Now, when I walked out there, immediately I saw these 2 guys kind of standing around. They were much too old to be students, but I didn't recognize them. They also did not work at the school. They were near my car sort of, and just standing under one of the few lights that was in the parking lot. It looked really sketchy right away, but I didn't want to back down. I continued walking to my car, and I noticed the 2 men just stare at me with their hands in their pockets. I had the instinctive urge to run away, but I fought it. I kept walking, and when I got about halfway to my car, I realized that the men were not going to move. They were going to stay right by my car, and there was no other cars in sight. So I decided to say something. I said, "Fellas, what's going on tonight?" None of the men said anything back to me. They just kept looking at me as they sort of paced around. As I got even closer, I saw both of them start to walk right in my direction. Now, to me, this seemed like they wanted some trouble. I'm not a violent person, but I would like to think I can take a guy in a fight. 2, on the other hand, is a different story. These guys had their hands in their pockets, so they very well might have had weapons on them too. And because of that, I made probably a stupid decision. I realized that they were both going towards me, and I finally listened to my instincts. I turned around and just took off running in the opposite direction. Thankfully, they didn't take out a gun and shoot me or anything, but they did start to chase after me. For what reason, I don't know. Being a gym teacher, I'm pretty fit and can run pretty fast. In fact, I was a sprinter in high school, so I used my speed to take off back towards the school. The man raced after me, but I was able to pull away with my speed. I kept going and did not stop until I was on the complete opposite end of the school. Then I took out my phone and dialed 911. I looked around and no longer saw the guys. I walked down the sidewalk until I saw police cars approaching about 5 minutes later, and I flagged them down. Then we went back to the parking lot where the men were. When we arrived, though, they were gone. I spoke with the officers and then made a report. Then I was able to drive home. After that, I never saw or heard anything more from the men or about the incident. Thankfully, I haven't walked out to my car that late at night again either. This is something that happened a few years ago. So, I live alone in a 2-story house about 10 minutes outside of the city. I enjoy living here, and one night I ordered a pizza to be delivered. I was certainly craving a nice pizza, and I was excited for it to arrive. A while later, I heard the doorbell ring, and I walked over and answered it. It was the pizza delivery guy, and I handed him the money, and he gave me the pizza and breadsticks. My hands were full, and I remember that after saying bye to the delivery guy, I was struggling with the door. He said that he would get it, and he shut the door for me as I walked to the kitchen with the pizza boxes. Then I went and got some pieces of pizza, went into the living room, and watched a movie while eating. It was a great relaxing night, until a few hours later. I was now watching another movie and still on the couch. Out of nowhere, though, I heard the front door opening. I was so confused at first. Obviously, I live alone, so nobody else would be entering the house. It was at that moment that I realized I hadn't locked the front door. Normally, it's a habit that whenever I close the front door, I lock it. However, my hands had been full with the pizza, and I hadn't closed the door. The pizza guy had. I had simply forgot to go back and lock it. I couldn't believe someone was entering the house, though, and I didn't know who. I did what made the most sense to me at the time. I jumped down from the couch onto the carpeted floors. Then I crawled over to the corner of the room, and I hid behind this large lazy boy chair. The living room was also in the back corner of the house, and the opposite end from the front door, so I had a little bit of time to hide. It was a pretty good hiding place, but if whoever was in my house really looked, they would find me. I heard footsteps, and I realized that I didn't have my phone. I had left it on the couch about 15 feet away from me. This was not good. Whoever was in the house entered and then started walking closer. They went into the kitchen area and then the dining room. Then I heard them start to enter the living room. That's when I got really nervous. However, whoever this was didn't get that close to where I was hiding. They stayed at the far end of the room and seemed to walk up the stairs. I didn't dare try to look and see who it was, and I stayed put. When I heard the person reach the top of the stairs, I decided to make a run for it. I knew that I would be able to make it out of the house if I was quick. So I got up, tiptoed to the couch, got my phone, and then ran over to the front door. I left the house, called 911, and then ran to my car and got inside of it. I drove a few blocks away and waited for the police. They arrived a short time later and entered my house with my permission. They ended up finding a man hiding upstairs in my bedroom. I had no clue who he was and had never seen him before to my knowledge. He obviously had just walked right in the house. I was really grateful that I was able to get away when he went upstairs. I'm also grateful that he was still there so the police were able to catch him. Something really strange and creepy happened to me once. This was back about 25 years ago or so. At the time, it was just my husband and I living in our house. We lived in a neighborhood with many other houses on it, but it was generally pretty quiet, especially at night. I remember one evening around 7 or 8 p.m., I was looking out of our front window for whatever reason. I noticed that there was a mail truck parked on the side of the road on the other side of the street. I didn't know what it was doing there. We had already received the mail earlier that day, plus something about the truck looked off, like the mail logo wasn't quite correct looking. To me, it seemed kind of suspicious. I didn't see anybody get out of it though, and I couldn't quite tell if anybody was inside. Several hours later, and I looked again, and the truck was still there. I found that to be very odd. Our street was not really the type that would have cars parked on the side of it a whole lot. There wasn't really much that I could do about it though. I know by the next morning, the truck was gone. So really I forgot about it until the next night though. This time, the truck came back again. It was later than before though. I was passing by the front window at probably 10 o'clock at night or so, maybe later. I noticed that the same mail truck was stopped on the side of the street. This time though, I saw movement in the driver's area. Then the door opened and a man got out. He was wearing a jacket and a hat, as well as sunglasses and a backpack. It looked sort of strange. Then he walked up into the yard of the people who lived across the street from us. I watched as he went up to their front step, and then he kind of got out of my view. I knew he didn't live there, but I thought maybe he knew the neighbors and was visiting. Still, I kept watching though. Soon the man appeared again walking down the yard. Then he crossed the street and entered our front yard. I quickly ducked down from the window. The man walked all the way up and then got to our front step. I could hear him there. There was a brief 2 knocks at the door before he turned and quickly walked away. I peeked out of the window to see the man walking back down, and then I saw him go into the next door neighbor's property. I then went and told my husband about what was going on. When he came to look though, the man was out of sight. His mail truck was still there though. My husband got curious and decided to go outside. I didn't know what he was going to do, and I told him not to go after the guy or anything because he might be dangerous. But when my husband opened the door, he realized that there was something on our front step. It was a single VHS tape. He brought it inside and showed it to me. This was a long time ago, so of course we had a VCR. We were both very curious as to what was on the tape because it had no label or anything. We put the tape in the VCR and pressed play. It started out looking like a home video taken from a video camera, and it was showing out the windshield of a car driving down the road at night. There were no sounds other than the driving sounds. This continued for about probably 5 minutes. Then the camera turned, and we could see part of the man's face. He was still wearing sunglasses and a hat though, and only like half of his face was visible in the frame. He then started laughing in a really creepy way. This continued for an uncomfortable amount of time. It was enough to give my husband and I the creeps. Then it abruptly stopped. That was all that was on the tape. We looked outside and the guy was still gone. We thought about calling the cops, but decided not to. A while later, the man returned to his mail truck vehicle and left. It looked as though maybe he was giving the videotapes to everybody who lived on our street. Why though, I have no idea. After that night, he never came back. I never found out who the guy was or why he did that. Maybe it was just a strange and creepy prank. Either way, it really freaked me out. I used to be a pizza delivery driver. It was a job that I had for about a year when I was younger. The pizza place that I worked for was pretty good. I enjoyed working there. I remember that we had this one customer though that got banned from ordering from us. He would often call and order pizzas to his house. Then he would act really creepy or rude to the delivery drivers. 3 different ones had all reported him, sometimes multiple occasions. So our manager ended up banning him, and there was literally a note on the wall saying not to accept his order, because he would try calling and ordering, or ordering online, and we wouldn't let him. A couple of times after he was banned, some of his orders got through because we had forgotten, and that led to more complaints. I personally never had to deliver to him, but I heard from the other drivers that he was just not nice at all. I guess he cursed out one of the delivery drivers for no apparent reason once. Another time, he called one of the drivers a curse word, and then another time he tried to get one of the delivery drivers to enter his house, and when they said no, he literally tried to pull her inside. We ended up getting a new manager hired though, who was part-time. His name was Andy, and overall he was cool, but kinda bossy. One time when I was working as a delivery driver, he gave me a pizza and an address and told me to deliver it. I immediately recognized it as the banned address. I took it up with Andy, and I told him how the guy was banned and we weren't supposed to deliver there. Andy said that he had already took the order. He said, "Look buddy, just do one more delivery there for me." So it was apparent that I had to go, so I took the pizza and then left. I was kinda mad at Andy, but I was also curious how the creepy man would act. I figured maybe I could just give him the pizza, get the money, and leave without a problem. How hard could it be? If he wanted to yell stuff at me for whatever reason, he could go right ahead. I didn't really care. I didn't know if the guy was just a grouch or if he enjoyed being rude to people or what. Eventually, I arrived. He lived in what looked like a pretty typical neighborhood. I took the pizza, got out of the car, and then walked up to the front step. Before I even reached it though, the guy opened his front door and was looking at me. He looked to be in his 50s or so, had dark sort of long hair and a handlebar mustache. He also had an open can of Miller Lite in his hand. "Who the F are you?" he called out as I was walking up. I said, "I'm the pizza delivery driver delivering the pizza that you ordered, sir." He then told me to just give him the pizza already and shut up. So I walked up to him and handed him the pizza. I could smell the strong smell of beer as well as cigarettes coming from inside the house. I told him the price, and the guy said, "You expect me to pay for this crap?" That's when I got worried that I wasn't going to get out of there with any money. I told him, "Yes, I need the money." The man then said that he had the money inside his house, and I could go and get it if I was brave enough. I thought about it for a moment and thought, no, I don't think I am. But then I realized that I really needed to get the money or Andy would get mad at me. So I tried to do a compromise and I asked the man to go get the money for me. He said no. Then I reluctantly said that I would go get it. The man stepped back and I entered the house. It was very cluttered. There were boxes and beer cans everywhere. I stayed just inside of the door. The man then said that the money was in the basement. At that point, I thought, heck no, and I turned around and just walked out. The man started saying something, but I didn't even care. I ran out of his yard and back for my car. He was yelling at me the whole time. I got in my car, left, and drove back to work. When I arrived back, I was furious with Andy. I told him that the guy was totally insane and we never should have took the order. Andy asked for the money, and I said how the guy didn't pay. Andy started to give me some kind of new employee orientation lecture about how I have to make sure I get money from the customers or the business will lose money. That really ticked me off. I literally started yelling at Andy that the guy was trying to get me to go into his basement. It got heated for a moment, but Andy ended up understanding, and after a conversation, he was cool about it in the end. After that, we never delivered to that guy again. I've been a mailman for almost 10 years. For the past few years, I've had a walking route that I do every day. I live by the city, so there are some very large neighborhoods that I deliver mail to. I have a route that I go on, and I walk from one house to another with my large mail bag, dropping off the mail for each address. When the weather is nice, I really enjoy it because I get lots of good exercise from walking so much. In my entire time working the job, I've never been scared of anything, not even dogs. And that's mainly because I deliver in the morning time and not at night or anything. But one day, that all changed. I was delivering on my route through a very large neighborhood. There were tons of houses all pretty close to each other. So I was on the route, and at one point I came up to a house just like any other. The houses around there did not have mailboxes down by the street, but would instead be up next to the door of the house. So I walked up the steps to the front porch area with the mail ready to put it in the box. When I got there, I saw that the main door to the house was open and just the screen door was closed, so I could kind of see inside. There was a man standing not far away from the front door, and he looked over at me as I was walking up the steps. I just kind of nodded hello to him, and he seemed kind of surprised to see me. He didn't really react though, and then I stepped up towards the mailbox. However, when I was about to put the mail in, the man from inside suddenly spoke. He said, "Hey, can you just bring the mail inside here quick?" I said sure, and I opened the front door and stepped inside the house. After getting in, I saw the man, who was pretty tall and also large. He told me to set it on the kitchen table, which was about 10 feet away. I walked over and set the mail down, but as I was doing so, I heard the front door closing. I looked over and saw the man standing directly in front of it and facing me. He had a very serious and almost angry look on his face. Then I heard another man's voice from down the hallway somewhere in the house yell, "What's going on over there?" I was confused, but just wanted to leave and continue with my route. I started walking over to the man standing in front of the door. He wasn't moving at all though. Then I heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. I looked over and saw another man come walking into the room. He saw me and said, "The mailman, no." I looked around and asked if I could leave. The big guy said to me, "No, you ain't leaving." I had a bad feeling, and I had had a bad feeling ever since the guy shut the door. I looked around and saw a back door. It was kind of just an instinct, but I took off and started running for it. As soon as I did, both men started to chase after me. I was able to make it to the door, but when I stopped to open it, the smaller man caught up to me and tackled me to the ground. There was a brief struggle, and the big guy came over there as well. Honestly, my mind kind of went blank, and I don't fully remember what happened. I just know that somehow I was able to fight them off just long enough to get up and make it out the door. I took off running outside, and the men briefly chased after me, but I was faster than them, and I ran down the street far away. When I realized they were not chasing me anymore, I stopped and I called the police. Then I waited there for them to arrive. They went to the house, but the men were gone. It turns out, though, that neither of the men owned the house. They had broken in and were robbing it. That made a little more sense to me as to what happened. I had been very confused. Despite being shaken up, though, I was thankfully not injured and was able to continue with my route for the day. Several days later, the police located the men who had done a string of robberies in the area. Looking back, I'm really glad that I made it out of there okay, and I'm glad that the men were caught. I work for the U.S. Postal Service and am a mailman. I drive a mail delivery truck every day and deliver mail to houses as well as some apartments and businesses. I've had several different routes over the years. My craziest experience happened about 2 years ago now. My route at that time took me through this pretty nice neighborhood at one point. It wasn't like a super wealthy neighborhood or anything, but I just thought that it was a nice neighborhood. It had decent houses on both sides of the street, and it was never that crowded or busy overall. I enjoyed driving there, and the people seemed to be pretty nice. So one morning, I was making my deliveries. I would drive right up to the mailboxes and then just put the parcels right in the box and then continue on. So I reached one mailbox and I saw the house up ahead that would be the next one had a fairly short driveway and the garage door was open. As I finished putting the mail in the box that I was at, I slowly proceeded to the next mailbox. As I was doing so, I saw a man walking out from the garage of the house ahead, and he walked down the driveway towards the mailbox. The man had a beard, sort of long hair, and I remember that he was barefoot. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt though. He approached me as I was about to put the mail in his box. He told me that he would just take it and held out his hands. So I gave him the mail and told him to have a nice day, and then I drove on to the next house. I continued with my route and didn't really think anything more of it. The next day, just about the same thing happened. The guy, who was once again barefoot, walked down the driveway and took the mail directly from me. Then he walked back up the driveway and into the garage. I had never seen the guy before, but I didn't really pay that much attention to who lived where. I delivered to a ton of houses in the area. The next day though, I got called by my supervisor and told that someone on my route was not receiving their mail. I was very confused because I knew that I had delivered to every address. I'd been doing the job long enough to be confident that I had not made a mistake. I found out where exactly I was told they weren't getting their mail. I realized it was the barefoot guy who I had been handing the mail to. This made me angry because I was literally handing the mail right to the guy. I told my boss this, and he said that he would get back to me. A short time later, he told me that the homeowner never accepted the mail directly from me, and nobody else lived there. He told me that the guy who lived there is gone at work all day when the mail arrives. I was confused and thought that maybe his neighbor was stealing his mail or something. The next day at my route, I did not see the barefoot guy. I put the mail in the box and continued. Later on, I found out some crazy information from my boss. He told me that the guy who lived there said that a man had been secretly living in his garage without him knowing. After he heard about me handing the mail to a guy coming out of his garage, he went into the garage to look around. Apparently, that's when he found the guy living there. I guess the man rarely used his garage and hadn't been in it in weeks. After he saw the guy, he called the police, and the man was arrested for trespassing, and his mail was also in the garage. It was the craziest thing I ever heard. I was also relieved that I hadn't done anything wrong and wasn't in trouble. The guy who lived there actually called me personally to thank me, which I thought was really nice. At the end of the day, I'm really glad that I was able to help, and that the man living in the garage was caught without causing any major problems. That's been my craziest experience as a mailman.
I live in northern Utah, on the edge of a small highway town. There's not really anything but a few stores, truck stops, and motels right up along the main highway. The roads to the outskirts are all dirt, just leading to a few other homes and large private acres of forest and grassy fields. This was a pretty typical day for me. I worked remotely from home and finished up around 6. From there, I headed into town to grab some groceries and stock up on a few items around the house. Even though it was a highway town, the highway wasn't actually all that busy, so none of the stores were ever too crowded. I pulled in and started shopping. While I was in there though, I happened to notice a guy looking at me. At first, I thought nothing of it. I probably just looked over at him at an awkward timing while he happened to be looking over at me. I kept going about my shopping, but a couple minutes later, and in a different